Well, good afternoon, everyone. I think we will get started. Welcome, everyone. Glad you could join us today for our 1-hour webinar titled AP Automation Success in 2023, Avoid These 10 Simple Mistakes. My name is Jeff Willett. I'm part of the marketing team here at MHC, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. Our speaker is Mary Schaeffer, who I will introduce shortly. First, a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. All participants are muted to prevent background noise. Please feel free to type in any questions you may have along the way into the Q&A section, and we will answer those as they come in. All attendees will receive a follow-up email with the link to the recording on our website, so you can view it again on demand. And there will be a post-webinar survey that will appear when the webinar ends. Please use the survey to let us know how we're doing and to request any additional information from MHC, and we really do appreciate your feedback. And then one more item before I hand off to Mary. For those of you who are not familiar with MHC, we help organizations tackle digital transformation with speed and confidence, using our solutions to automate the creation, capture, and communication of documents and communications across core business processes. Our flexible end-to-end automation platform offers solutions to help users increase efficiency by eliminating tedious tasks, achieve operational excellence goals, and strengthen relationships within your customers and vendors. And now about our speaker today. We're very enthused today to have Mary Schaeffer as our presenter. Mary is founder of AP Now and has been creating content around the AP function for 20+ years. She has served on the Business Payments Coalition and Federal Reserve's Remittance Delivery Assessment Work Group, and is currently a member of NACHA's ACH Network Advisory Panel. Mary also has been named top AP influencer for the last 3 years by the prestigious AP Association, a global organization headquartered in the UK. And before founding AP Now, she worked in corporate finance and treasury for Continental Grain as cash manager, Equitable Life, and now AXA and ONY. Without further ado, let's hear from Mary.
Thanks, Jeff and MHC. And also, I'd like to thank the attendees for coming to hear me chat today about automation. It's a really hot topic, and it's one that I've been talking about a lot, and hopefully you'll go home with a little bit more information than you came. So today's reality is that there's a lot of change, a lot of technology, a lot of new technology, and all sorts of things that are being thrown at the accounting and accounts payable function. And for the professionals who work in it, they have to sift through everything. And their mission, if you will, is to select the best pieces of technology, the best practice advice, etc., and integrate it and implement it into their accounts payable function so that it operates in as effective and efficient manner as possible. So not an easy task by any stretch of the imagination. So today's talk I have broken down into two main parts, if you will, or tranches. The first being what I call the problem, and that's going to be the bulk of the discussion. We're going to talk about why automation projects sometimes fail. They should be a success. So what goes wrong? I've identified 10 mistakes, simple things that people get wrong. And then, you know, if you have a weak foundation, then the whole house is going to come tumbling down. Sometimes, by the way, just by identifying the mistakes, this will give you the business intelligence you need so that you know where to look. And just by realizing that something could go wrong, you're less apt to make that mistake. But we're going to spend a little bit of time towards the end of the talk talking about some prevention steps that you can take so that your organization doesn't end up after putting a lot of hard effort into an automation project, having it be less than the stellar success that it should be. So before we get to that, though, we have our first polling question. And Jeff, I'm really interested to see what the folks have to say. How do you receive the majority of your invoices currently? And Jeff, are you gonna, here we go. So do you receive them by postal mail, email, in a portal, through EDI, or you're not sure? And after Jeff shows us what the answers are, I'll tell you what if this conforms to what I see when I talk with other groups, because this is like one of my favorite questions. And so it does. Okay, in this response, 65% of you said email was the way that you received the majority of your invoices. And I'm going to tell you from what I see, talking to a whole bunch of different groups of accountants, accounting professionals, accounts payable professionals, P2P, is that that number is a little bit on the low side. Typically, we see over 70% there. Okay. All righty. So we're going to close that and we're going to move on. By the way, nobody, and I'm sure this isn't coming as a surprise to you, nobody, EDI never comes out at the, as the top, as the contender, if you will. Okay, so what happens? Why do we run into these problems with automation when it's supposed to be so wonderful? And part of the reason is that folks have unrealistic expectations. This is especially true of management, who maybe only has a high level of understanding of what AP automation is going to be. And then they're, unhappy with the results because it doesn't meet these unrealistic expectations that they had. I wanted to share a very simple story. This is my own experience. It was when I was first working and personal computers were first coming into the business world. And I was working at Equitable then, and we got one computer for the whole Treasury Department, and we were all a little bit standoffish about it, but I didn't have enough sense to be. So I ended up being the person who learned how to use it, and I developed a very simple process for us to do our cash management forecast, to come up with our daily number for investing. And everybody was very impressed with it at that time. You wouldn't be. You'd be like, what's the big deal, Mary? But anyway, at that point they were, and I was going on vacation, and my boss was going to do the reporting for me, and he was all excited. He was going to learn how to do it. So he was in with me the last day before holiday, and he kept sitting with me. I was setting everything up, and he kept saying to me, when do I press the button? When do I press the button? Because he thought that, with this wonderful new computer, which could do like what a calculator can do today, all you had to do was press a button and everything would be, he'd get the magic answer, no work. Well, that you have to understand what's going on. You have to know what to expect so you can see when you get a bad result and oh, I got to go back and look. And he was unrealistic. And today, many times management just is unrealistic about what's going to come out. So you want to make sure that right from the beginning, you set realistic expectations. And if somebody has unrealistic expectations, the best time to deal with it is before you get started, not 3 months down the road when everybody's disappointed because the project didn't deliver. Now, the other places that we see, the other big place that we see unrealistic expectations coming in is not one that we expected. And to be honest, when I first started hearing about self-service vendor portals, I thought they were a wonderful thing. I still think they're a wonderful thing, but I understand the problem. And that is when you go into an automation project, whether it's just invoice automation, accounts payable automation, anything that involves a third party, you have to be absolutely realistic about what that third party is going to be willing to do. Okay, because if you're not, you can end up with egg on your face. So what has rolled out, if you will, is that suppliers, unsurprisingly, have no interest, if you will, or very little interest in changing what they do. And let's for a moment put ourselves in their shoes. Okay, and as and this is actually what happened to me. Not that I put myself in their shoes, but I was giving a talk at a credit conference to credit managers, trying to explain to him to the audience about these wonderful self-service vendor portals, and how if they put all their information into the self-service portal, it would reduce fraud, etc. And one of the women came up to me, a credit manager, and she literally screamed at me, and it brought the point home. She said, I have 6,000 customers. Do you expect me to learn how to use each of their portals and have a different password for each and learn how to use it, etc.? And I thought about it for a minute. It was like, oh, she's got a point there. So when you are making your selection and you're deciding what you're going to do, don't expect your suppliers to change their existing routines for you so that your automation project will be a success. Because if you rely too much on that, you're going to find once again, just like with management, that they're not going to do what you want, and you are not going to have the success that you should have. Okay. That old saying, you can't change others. The only thing you can change is yourself. Well, you have control of your employees and your team. You don't have too much control over your suppliers. So don't have unrealistic expectations as to exactly what your suppliers are going to be willing to do. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about on this level of unrealistic expectation is your staff. There are two areas that you want to address. Staff understanding. Okay, does your staff understand what the automation project can do, what they're supposed to do? Have you given them enough training? Okay, and this is a biggie, and this comes into staff fears. Do they understand what their role will be once you implement this new automation solution? If they are looking at this and they're saying, okay, the company is coming in, they're automating our accounts payable process. They're not going to need me anymore. I'm not going to have a job. They are going to be less likely to cooperate. But if instead of that, you go in and you say, yes, we're automating, we are removing some of the manual repetitive work that the staff does, but once the automation project is up and running, and that will take some time, and it will, we will be adding additional higher level responsibilities to your roster, if you will. And so you'll be, working on discrepancies. You'll be running after duplicate payments. You'll be collecting that. You'll be doing more analytical work. Whatever the story is, you want to explain to them. So you want to address whatever fears they have, and their fears are going to be about losing their job, number one, or not being able to use the technology. So make sure they understand that they are going to get the training that they need. Etc. And you might ask them, what else? What other questions do they have? And make sure they get answered. Sometimes they're going to be reluctant to share with this. Nobody's going to say, hey, I think I'm too old or too dumb to learn how to use this technology. They're not going to say that. So as a manager, you may have to kind of unravel whatever their fear is. Okay, so I kind of hopefully laid the background. Now I want to go over what I call the 10 big mistakes. I've already alluded to some of them. But before we get to that, we have our next polling question about, have you set up a separate email address for the receipt of invoices? And I have an answer for that. Okay, and I'm very interested to see how successful you guys are in getting people to use it. Okay, so you can see most of you have been successful you've set it up and you've been successful in getting people to use it. Unfortunately, a few of you still have people sending invoices wherever they want, and a few of you haven't done it yet. Okay, so I'm going to close this out if I can. Yes, okay, and we're going to move on. So I'm already hinting at some of the problems. Okay, so mistake number one that we see happening with this, with any automation project, is sometimes it will be one party who comes up with the idea, hey, we should automate, and they become, the driving force. Now, sometimes it's accounts payable, which, because I, talk to accounts payable people always, I and advocate for them. I kind of think that's okay. But sometimes it'll be somebody in treasury or sometimes someone in management, and they've heard her talk about this or whatever, and they're the driving force. But they have blinders on, because they can only look at the automation, the solution, the project, etc., from their own standpoint. And you need a whole bunch of different standpoints. So if you don't get all the impacted parties involved right from the beginning, you may find that you've gone down a path that is not sustainable, because it won't meet one of the needs of one of the parties. So you want to make sure, at a minimum, is that you have accounts payable involved, you have purchasing and procurement, or if you have a P2P department, you have them involved, you have treasury involved, you have accounting involved, and you have IT involved. Now, most of the time when you talk to service providers, what they'll tell you, and this is true, is that we'll either need no IT involvement or only a few hours. So you might think, oh, well, they only said 3 hours. That won't be too bad. So I won't get IT involved until the very end, because we only need 3 hours time. And then when you go to IT, first of all, they're aggravated that they weren't consulted. And all of a sudden you're at the bottom of the list and you can't get their help for a month or 6 weeks. So include everybody, listen to everybody's insights. Everybody looks at things a little bit differently. So it's nice to be able to get all these different points of view, because if, for example, there was going to be a problem integrating between your accounting system and your ERP system and the automation solution, you want to know that up front and you want to address it. Okay, you don't want to wait till the end, and then while the project's delayed 3 weeks, 6 weeks, while somebody tries to fix this problem. And if they're annoyed with you because they weren't consulted at the beginning, they drag their feet and it takes even longer. So make sure all impacted parties are involved and there's a discussion with them. Yes, this might mean a little hand holding. It might mean you have to have discussions with somebody, explaining things, but just go ahead and do it. It'll be easier in the long run. Okay. Now, I've already talked about mistake number 2 a little bit, but I'm just going to go through it again. If you require your suppliers to jump through hoops to use your new system, you're going to have less of a success, because they're not going to change. Okay. So you want to make it so that they have as little change to make as possible, or maybe even none. My favorite example with this, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but so, I won't spend so much time on it when we get to it, is if you can have an automation solution that is able to go into email and read the invoices from there. For the most part, you won't even have to talk to your suppliers. Your suppliers won't even need to know you're doing accounts payable automation, because if they're already emailing their invoices to you, they can just continue to email their invoices to you, and they don't have to make any change. So you can have a really high utilization rate right off the bat. If you require them to either set themselves up in a portal or deliver the invoices to a special place or make any change whatsoever, you're going to see your utilization drop, because they're not going to want to, they don't want to make changes, and they don't want to do anything special just for you when they have, 5,999 other customers they have to deal with, and they don't want to set a precedent. Okay. Mistake number 3. Not anticipating staff reluctance and needs. Okay, now, many times managers will think, oh, this will be no problem. My staff won't worry. It's not a problem. But you want to step back and you want to think, will it really be? If you explain to the staff what you're doing, how it will impact them, how they'll benefit from it, you have much greater chance of them going along with it, not dragging their feet, not bad mouthing the project all over the organization. The next thing I want to talk about is the fear of technology. Nobody admits to this openly. Well, a few people do, but most of the time your staff is not going to admit to this. Make sure they get a lot of training, give it to them as early as possible so they're comfortable with the technology and they're not afraid of it. When you think about COVID and how we basically all went home overnight, and 95% of the people who went home had never used Zoom before, and now all of a sudden everybody was on Zoom like it was no big deal. That's what you want to make it like that. You want to make them feel like that. But in order to do that, they have to be comfortable with the technology. And so you want to address that as soon as possible. And one other thing, you may be very comfortable with technology. They may sit down and show you how to use it. And, in 10 minutes, you're fine. You're zipping away and there's no problem. Your staff may not be that comfortable. They may need more training. So, give them a little bit of time, lead time, but make sure you address it, especially if you haven't used much technology in your operations and you've been doing things the same way for quite a long time. Along the same lines, not fully anticipating your suppliers' technology challenges. Now, with your staff, you can say, okay, everybody is going to have to go through this tutorial that they've set up online, and you have to do it by such and such date. You can, basically lay down the law, and you can kind of force at least your employees in the accounts payable team, maybe even in purchasing, to go through and learn how to use it. You have no control over your suppliers. You can't make them do anything. So as much as possible, try and select a solution that's intuitive, okay? If they have to use it. Of course, if you got the solution that reads from technology, then you don't have to worry about their technology challenges. They can be whatever they are as long as they're emailing you the invoice. You want to make sure that there is a good place for them to go for help. And again, that it's easy to find. Two other things that I've heard suppliers complain about is the password issue if they have to log in themselves. If they don't have to, again, if they're emailing invoices, the problem goes away. And the last thing is the technology upgrades if they're having to interact directly with your system. Every time the automation solution has an upgrade, and they will, that means that everybody's got to learn how to use it and make the changes. And so you're going to see a hiccup in usage as your suppliers have problems, don't know who to call, don't know what to do. So as much as you can, avoid that issue. One of the people on the credit side estimated that about 15% of all automation solutions have an upgrade issue each year. And so you might say, well, that means we won't have one for every, I think it's 6 or 7. I'm trying to do the math in my head, every 6 or 7 years. Well, yes, but your suppliers are dealing with a lot of different solutions, okay? All right, mistake number 5. This has to do with surprise issues. You need to plan for growth, okay? You need to make sure that whatever solution you select has the ability to be scaled, okay? Scaled for larger issues. Now, when you're purchasing it, I'm going to give you some credit. I'm going to say you go out and you're purchasing a new automation solution and you have, let's say you're processing 100 invoices a month. I know it's more, but let's just say it was 100 invoices, and you purchase a solution that will be able to handle 150 or 200. You think, okay, well, we're going to grow 5%, 10% a year, whatever it is. So you plan for this growth, but also be aware that there can be unanticipated growth, which is a good thing, not a bad thing. But maybe all of a sudden your company acquires another company, and now your AP staff basically is handling twice the amount of work. Will the solution that you selected be able to handle it? Hopefully the answer is yes. I mean, and this is a good problem. This is one that everybody should hope they get to deal with, okay? I'm sure the accounts payable people are saying, no, it's not a good one, but it is. Okay. Mistake number 6 is not providing adequate training for the staff. I know it might feel like I'm beating a dead horse with this, but a lot of times your staff is not going to want to own up, not going to say, I don't understand. Okay. So you want to train and overtrain until you're blue in the face, because nobody wants to look stupid. And so rather than asking a question, when you say to, when you're going through it, you say, everybody understands, and everybody shakes their head yes, but in reality 2 of them don't. They just don't want to admit it. When I was in college, I'll never forget a professor who said, if you ask a question, you might feel like a fool for a minute, but if you don't ask that question, you'll be a fool for the rest of your life, because you won't learn whatever the issue is. So encourage your people to ask questions. Better to ask a stupid question than not. And the other thing is, just because it seems like a stupid question, it's probably not. There's probably somebody else sitting in the room who has the same question, but is equally timid and doesn't want to ask. Obviously, you want a solution that's user-friendly, and user-friendly for everybody, okay? Not just the folks in AP. The more user-friendly it is, the higher the utilization will be. And let's face it, we are all hoping for 100% utilization, although that probably doesn't happen unless you have that email feature. Okay. Now, I've alluded to this before, but let's talk about it again. You need to involve IT early in the process. Now, I know even though a project may only involve a few hours, you figure, oh, I don't want to get them involved. They're going to raise all sorts of issues. They're going to want to make suggestions, or whatever. And you're like, I don't want to deal with that. That's fine. But keep in mind that if most of us are accounting people, finance people, accounts payable people, we see the world from our standpoint, but we don't see the technology issues. We don't even know what the technology issues are. If I'm going to be honest, at least I'm talking about myself. So your IT people will see things that you won't see. They'll be able to address your ERP integration issue, which is an important one. And again, if you don't involve them from the beginning, then when you go to them at the end, they may be resistant to get involved. And God forbid you haven't gotten them involved in the beginning, and now you're asking them to come involved, and they find something that makes it impossible to work with your ERP system. Then you've got a real problem. So just bite the bullet and invite them in. Okay, mistake number 8, and this goes back to unrealistic expectations. Expecting 100% utilization quickly is just not going to happen, okay? If you think about the way you get invoices now, I think 20% of you said that you can't even get people to send invoices all to the same spot. It just doesn't happen. I see many projects that have utilization in the 30%, 40% range. Suppliers send in paper invoices. God only knows what they do. But you need to be realistic in how quickly you're going to get to full utilization. And full utilization, by the way, is not 100%. You're still going to get a few paper invoices that you have to convert. You're still going to get, it won't be 100%, okay? And keep in mind, converting suppliers takes time. So, matching this up with your unrealistic management expectations. If, you have a management team that thinks you're going to go out and buy an automation solution, and you're going to install it on, let's say, June 1, and they think on June 5th they're going to be able to lay off half the AP stamp, they're just begging for a problem in that case. Okay, converting suppliers takes time. You're going to need to hold some of the suppliers' hands. You're going to need to, give instructions. You're going to have to go back and create, when they're doing improper things like sending invoices twice or sending invoices someplace other than the place that you ask them. So, for example, with my example of an email address set up just for invoices, you're going to still have suppliers who insist on sending the invoice to their favorite person in purchasing, the purchasing connection. And that person, maybe they send it to you, maybe they don't, but you want to correct that behavior, because otherwise every month you're going to be dealing with that issue. And there are going to be all sorts of issues like this. It's going to take time. It's just not a smooth, easy, okay, press the button, like my old boss, and everything, voila, is perfect. Okay, now, mistake number 8. Not anticipating staff roadblocks. And these are people, they can be in AP, they can be in purchasing, you don't know where they are, who tell suppliers, oh, don't use that new automation solution that we just purchased. I hear this from a number of different companies, that this happens. Now, these may be the people that you expect to do this. And sometimes it's people that you don't expect to do it. So with the people that you expect this from, I'm sure you have them at your company. Every company has them. No matter what the new practice is and what the new solution is, they say it won't work. And they have reasons, they have 10 reasons why won't work. This is a bad idea, etc. Now, if you know who those people are, you can cut this issue off at the path by going after them from the beginning. So try and involve, sit down and talk with them, explain what the project is. If you have some sort of a task force, invite them on. You want to convert them. You want to change them from those naysayers who are always going around saying it won't work. This is bad, that's bad, to the person who, because you gave them this little bit of extra attention, who's now going to go, oh, this is wonderful. And they're going to become your missionary, selling it within the company, selling it to other people, just telling all these other employees who are looking at this with a little bit of a skewed eye, oh, it's wonderful, you should use it for this. Okay. And then those are the people who you can anticipate. There will also be some who you don't anticipate who'll be throwing roadblocks, and they'll be doing this. They tend to be the people on staff who are either afraid of the technology, afraid, don't know how to use it, or afraid they're going to use their job. You're going to have to be a little bit more of a Sherlock Holmes, if you will, to figure out who these people are and make sure that you address their problems, if you will. And then there are going to be those people who use it incorrectly. They may use it incorrectly on purpose, intentionally or unintentionally. They may not have bothered to go through all the training. I have to admit, I'm one of the worst culprits when I get a training manual, or when I get anything new. Instead of reading the whole thing, I'm, flipping through the pages just for the part that I want, so that, I can read, 2 paragraphs instead of 8 pages. And then, of course, I don't know how to use something. You probably have a whole bunch of folks like me on your staff. And then there are people who they haven't had enough training. The fact that they haven't had enough training might just mean that they need extra training, or they may be the type who, has done what I've done. So you'll have to keep your eyes opened in the beginning for this. But again, as much of these naysayers as you can convert to missionaries just will improve the whole process for you. Okay, mistake number 10, if you will. You want to regularly monitor usage and errors. Now, remember, I said don't expect 100% usage in the first week, but you want to, more than you would once the program is up and running and everybody is, everything's operating as you'd expect. You want to collect your metrics. You want to definitely keep track of any errors that are made, okay, and there will be. And then you want to track usages. The first week you got 25% of your invoices in this week. The second week you were up to 50%, etc. You want to monitor it real closely in the beginning, and you want to monitor the errors. And from this, you'll be able to see, is the implementation going as planned? If you had a reasonable implementation plan and reasonable expectations, you can hit it. But also by keeping an eye on the errors, you can figure out, okay, are we making the same error over and over again? Or, we've made 10 errors this week, 80 of them were this. Let's look at what this error is. Is there something we can do to change our process so we don't make it on a regular basis? What do we need to adjust? What do we need to change? By making these little spot changes in the beginning, you are well along to having a successful program. This is, by the way, why some organizations, when they first start with an automation project, they don't roll it out to 100% of their suppliers. They don't go for the 100%. They take the first month and they'll maybe roll it out to 5 or 10% of their suppliers. The suppliers who they have the best relationship with, who if something goes wrong, it's not the end of the world. They're not, threatening to put them on credit hold because they haven't gotten paid, etc. So you want to think about maybe doing it that way so that you can, have a chance to correct anything that's going wrong. You'll also be able to adjust. You want to pull your staff in, maybe the first week, at the end of the first week, pull them in, ask them, how's it going? Is what's going smoothly? What's not going smoothly? What do we need to fix? And you want to make those little adjustments right up front so that you can have a smooth implementation. So if if you're making payments, for example, and you're getting invoices from a parent or a subsidiary, you might even want to start there. So just try and test it out and monitor and make sure you're figuring out where the kinks are, and then hopefully eliminating them if at all possible. Okay, so we talked about some of the problems. As you can see, just knowing what they are sometimes puts you in the right mindset to make sure that you have solutions. But let's talk about some practices that we can look at before to address all the problems, at once, if you will. All right, but before we do that, we've got our next polling question. What percentage of your invoices you receive are duplicates? Okay, and I'll tell you what we see, and I'm curious to see what you say. All righty, here we go. Okay, great. A third of you said less than 5%. 29% said 6 to 20. 10% said 20 to 30, and then 5% said more than 30. What we see, and this, by the way, falls in line with what the research that we're seeing at AP now, but generally what we see is about 25% of all invoices are duplicates. So that's another reason, by the way, why automation makes a lot of sense. If your automation solution can pick out what those duplicate invoices are and discard them before you have valuable staff time spent on, processing an invoice, then, that's a save. Most organizations, in fact, I don't know any organization that has said, oh, we're getting 20% or 25% of our invoices as duplicates, so we're going to give you another staff person because it takes time to weed those duplicates out. And we understand that AP has this extra work. I don't know of anybody who said that. And if you were lucky enough to have been in an organization where they said that, then I'd love to hear from you. Okay, so, I'm a great believer in ounce of prevention, worth a pound of cure. So what can we do to avoid some of these problems? Well, we can implement some best practices. Now, unsurprisingly, my best practice number one is set realistic expectations. And you want to do this right off the bat, okay? And you want to start with the service provider, who is ever is providing you the automation solution. You want to know from them, what can you expect from them? And then you want to hold them to it, okay? 100% utilization on day one, not realistic, but maybe there is some better things. You want to know, for example, how quickly will they respond to inquiries? And, will they be around a little bit extra in the first week when you go live, etc. You want to set realistic expectations with management. This may, by the way, be the hardest thing to do because, they went to a talk and somebody told them, it never fails. Somebody told them that, they got rid of their whole AP staff and part of their purchasing staff and whatever, some ridiculousness. And you need to bring them back to reality, because if you don't, you're going to have a bigger problem down the road. So it may not be a fun conversation, but it's one that you have to have. And the same thing with your staff. You want them to know what's coming, how it will impact the accounts payable function as far as they're concerned, how, more importantly, how it will impact their job and what you expect from them in the future. So have those conversations, have them up front, and then you can go from there. The next issue, the next best practice, if you will, when it comes to an automation solution, is to recognize the issues, identify the pain points, the problem points, and then make sure you address them. And when you're, setting out your game plan, if you will, make sure you allocate, if you will, the resources that you need to address those issues. So going back to the management conversation, especially, your management team and what you've seen in other examples, whether you want to allocate a 5-minute conversation to this, or this is going to be an hour and a half discussion. So you want to address the issues and integrate them into your planning, not the problems, but the solutions. Okay. And then make part of your planning identifying the issues and the solutions. And my example was the person who's always throwing the roadblocks, turn them into a missionary for your project. If they can do as good of a job promoting your automation solution to the rest of the company as they do telling people things won't work, you've got a real winner on your hand. Require as little change as possible from suppliers. The more change you require, the more things you require that they'll do differently, the less chance you're going to have that they're going to comply, and the lower utilization that you're going to have. So again, email receipt of invoices. Once they're doing that, they don't even have to know how you're processing the invoice. It's really none of their business. And if possible, make sure that they have a contact, someone they can go to if they have technical issues on the using the software. Unfortunately, if John Smith out of ABC company all of a sudden calls a service provider, whoever, the service provider doesn't know who they are. It's not going to help them with if they lost their password, for example, and they're going to be less apt to give technical advice. So if you have someone that they can turn to, that will go a long way towards not only getting them to utilize the solution that you want, but also to having supplier satisfaction. And by the way, that someone, that place for technical assistance, it might have to be someone on your AP team, which I know is not what you wanted to hear from me, but it is what it is. Now, when it comes to training for end users, you want to make it mandatory for your staff, okay? Don't tolerate someone like me who's, reading the manual and only reading, a quarter of it that applies to them. You want to make it mandatory that they all do the end training, okay? Now you can mandate this for your staff. Obviously, you can't mandate it for suppliers because they probably won't do it, but you can encourage them as much as possible. But your staff, mandatory, okay? Now, when it comes to your AP staff, because they're going to be the ones who are most likely to be impacted, you want to keep them in the loop, okay? Don't let them hear this, gossip from somebody else. The last thing you want is somebody from purchasing coming over and telling, somebody on the AP staff, hey, guess what I heard? I heard they're purchasing an automation solution, because their minds will go to the worst spot. They will assume the worst, okay? You want to provide the adequate training. And when we talk about adequate training, by the way, you want to talk about new processes and any new tasks that they are taken on, okay? And it won't necessarily be as easy as they might anticipate, but give them the training manual and also let them go through it as many times as they want. If someone has to go through it 5 times, God help us, but if somebody has to go through 5 times, let them go through it 5 times and with no comments, because better that they go through it the 5 times or whatever, and they do it right than they don't and they get it wrong. All righty, our last polling question, and then I think we have a little few minutes from MHC, and we also have questions from the audience. So I'm interested to see your questions or comments if you just have something you want to share. All right, do you have an active or upcoming AP initiative? And this is a yes or no answer. Okay. By the way, can you tell I like dogs?
Next slide, Mary.
Oh, sorry. I'm sitting
Okay.
here. All right. Okay. So you're going to talk about North Star for a minute?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Just thank you again for sharing many reasons why it's important to properly manage your automation processes and avoid mistakes that could cost you money in the future. And just one little thing about MHC, if you're not familiar with our North Star product, we help empower people to manage your payment processes and your communications with the simplicity of self-service. We facilitate streamlining your AP payment process with an automated accounts payable solution configured to your specific business needs. And finally, we help maintain compliance, reduce your AP team's workload, and ensure that payments are made accurately and on time. Now let's get to some Q&A if you want to go to the next slide.
Yes, please. Here we go.
Okay. We did have a few questions that came in, Mary, and the first one is automating your AP processes expensive?
I want to say no. When I first started hearing about AP automation, it was about the year 2000, and the solutions were ridiculously expensive. I was here, but they were all customized, and I was hearing prices like $1 million, $2 million. Today, the prices have come down tremendously, so we don't even hear the $1 million price tags on big customized systems. They're very affordable, very user-friendly. And basically, there's a solution for almost a company of any size. And I think the folks from MHC can back me up on that.
Yes.
Okay. So the simple answer is no.
Great. Next question. So you addressed this within your presentation, but we had one person ask, if our team members are worried about how their jobs are going to be changed or eliminated, how do you suggest dealing with those employees?
Have an open and honest conversation with them, explain what they're going to do, how it's going to change. And this is really a hard conversation, but if the person's job is going to be eliminated, then tell them, okay? For the most part, your answer is going to be much better than anything that they've imagined in their mind. So just have the conversation. If they're going to be taking over, I don't know, sales and use tax, I'm making an absurd example, start giving them the training for sales and use tax right away. If they're going, whatever they're going to do, make sure they understand and they have a clear understanding of it. One of the things that we run into with when we talk to people about the automation solution is accounts payable staffs are almost always understaffed. Most accounts payable departments have many projects they would like to take on, but they don't have the staff to do it. Simple example, tracking down and recovering duplicate payments. Also, we're seeing an expansion into the use of analytics with all the data that can be extracted from ERP systems, and AP has access to it. So there's a whole slew of opportunities within a company that the person can do there. But the important thing, communication. Communicate with them.
Great. And then one final question. What can we do to incent our suppliers to send invoices to our portal?
What I would do is, in case you haven't guessed, is have one email address set up and make sure you got a solution that can read the invoices from that email address. If you don't, see if somebody can develop, I think it's an API for that, but if they have to go and do anything out of the ordinary when it comes to anything but delivering invoices, you are going to see the utilization just drop. Because put yourself, that old saying about walk in somebody else's shoes. Well, it's really true. Put yourself in your supplier's shoes. They have how many different customers? And if you ask them to deliver to all these different portals, they're just not going to do it. So try and find a way. I know this isn't the answer you're looking for, but try and find a way to make a link between an email address and your portal. It's a problem. I will grant you, it's a problem.
We did have a comment that came in on the subject. The
Yes.
comment is, if you give documented instructions to suppliers, make sure you test them internally first. As a small supplier, I counted this the hard way.
Yes. And in fact, I'm friendly. I'm very good friends with Lynn Lawson, who I think you're going to have as a speaker on one of the other ones. And she did some work for a big company whose name you would recognize. And they gave her the it was a nightmare for her. She said, I don't know how they get anybody else to do it. But yes, give them the instructions and test them.
Yep.
Because you'd be surprised how often that they don't work.
Perfect. Next slide, Mary.
Okay. And the next slide. Okay, wait a second. Okay. So
yeah, again, thank you for your time today. And again, thank you, Mary, for a wonderful presentation. If you do have any questions about MHC, please feel free to reach out to Bridget Miller, or you can visit mhcautomation.com to learn more. Next slide.
Oh my God. Okay, so the next slide, which was, that's why I had to laugh when I saw that comment about the instructions, because Lynn Lawson, I see, is coming to speak to you about virtual cards. So I have to tell you, she does some speaking for me at AP now, and she's always very highly rated. But more to the point, anytime I listen to her talk, or I do a talk with her, because occasionally we do talks together, I always learn something that I didn't know.
Yep. If you'd like to learn more about next month's webinar, you can also go to mhcautomation.com to learn more. Thank you again. Just a reminder, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording to our website, and also to do the post-webinar survey. Again, thank you for any feedback you provide. Thank you, Mary, and everyone have a good rest of the day.
Thanks. And thanks, MHC, for this opportunity to
You're
talk
welcome.
to the audience.
Thanks again.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.